Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought today we'd take a look at the Leela TCEC game against Stockfish, and this is round number 36. In this game, Leela TCEC was playing with the white pieces, Stockfish was playing with black. So we'll go into the book moves straight away. It was e4, c5, that's a Sicilian, knight to f3, d6, d4, takes, knight to f6, knight c3, g6, bishop e3, bishop g7, and then f3, followed by castles, queen d2, knight c6 by black, bishop c4, and queen a5, castles queenside, and bishop to d7. And we get into a Sicilian dragon Yugoslav attack. And here, now Leela played the main move in this position, which is bishop to b3, dropping the bishop back. And Stockfish played the most common move again, rook f to c8, eyeing up this c3 knight and this c file. And again, Leela played another main move here, which is now to attack black's kingside with the move h4, which is what Leela played. And then Stockfish went in for knight to e5, clearing the c file away to make room for this rook, which is hitting the king. And Leela now sidesteps the king to b1. Now typically the main move by black now is to play knight to c4. And then usually what occurs is takes, followed by knight to b3, hitting the queen. The queen retreats back to c7, and white can play a move like bishop to d4, contesting this diagonal against the bishop on g7 here. Again, the play usually continues here with bishop e6, h5, and a5. After takes, a4. Now we get into an interesting variation where both sides seem to be attacking one another. And to be honest, this position is actually given as dead equal for both sides. So in this position it's relatively anyone's game, so basically the best player should win. But going back to the game, after king to b1, Stockfish just solidified here with h5, stopping the progression of this h-pawn. Leela went in with bishop to g5, and Stockfish got on with their attack with the move b5. So again, this is quite a double-edged position. And Leela now offered the trade of queens with knight to d5. And the knight also attacks this e7 pawn with a check as well, so it's going to be quite tricky for Stockfish to deal with. If they play queen to d8 here, I think Leela can play g4. And looking at this after a5, white comes out better after taking on f6. And after taking again, and black takes, white successfully doubled the f-pawns. And after g takes h5, frankly white's got a great position. They've totally decimated black's kingside pawn structure. And basically what we're following now is queen h6 or just rook to g1. Either rook were probably good in this position. And the bishop's also got a great escape square for white. You can just drop it into d5 at some point if you really wanted to, which is very nice. So after knight to d5, okay, the only logical thing for black to do is to take on d2, which is what happened. Queen takes d2 was played, followed by rook takes d2. Stockfish played king f8 to protect that e7 pawn, and there was a trade on f6. Knight takes f6, pawn takes, and bishop f4. So I've highlighted the d6 pawn because it's incredibly weak now, and white successfully managed to double black's f-pawns. I mean, this bishop on g7 looks quite atrocious now, and basically white's game from now on is just to try and win this d6 pawn, probably going to double on the d file, and white is frankly sitting really comfortably now in this position. So play continued on with a5, threatening to play a4, so Leela plays a3 to give the bishop an escape square. King g8 is played, giving a space to the black bishop. Play continued on though, so Leela doubled rooks, eyeing up this d6 pawn. Bishop f8 protects the pawn, and Leela just plays knight to e2, so makes way for these two rooks. King g7 is played by Stockfish, and now rook to d4 by Leela, followed by rook a7, bishop to d2, and then knight to c6, hitting the rook, which drops back to d3. And Stockfish plays rook to b8, so maybe preparing to play b4 and continuing on their attack. So it's actually quite an interesting position because Leela's not got a lot to do now. The d6 pawn is protected by this bishop, so basically it's white's job now just to weather this storm by black. So she starts off with bishop d5, centralising the bishop, which makes a lot of sense, moving it off the b file. Stockfish attacks though with b4, but Leela now plays a very nice move. She plays rook to b3, and this really helps protect white's position. The point is, if black takes on a3, there's probably just going to be a trade of rooks, and if black now plays a4, the trick is just to play rook to d3, and after taking on a3, you just play rook takes, and white's absolutely fine. This d6 pawn is a nuisance because it blocks in this f8 bishop, so the rook is absolutely fine on the f3 square. And maybe now white can just play moves like bishop c3 as well, and white's frankly really comfortable. So going back to the game, after rook b3, rook a6 was played instead by Stockfish. Bishop e1 was played to clear the d file. Takes on a3 was played, and again, like we suggested, there was a trade of rooks. And now this is an interesting move. I wonder what you would play here as white. Because I would be thinking I'd be taking this a3 pawn off. But now I think Leela plays a very nice move. If you thought of the move b3, you could be a computer, because that's an incredibly strong move. And the point is now, basically, white's just going to walk their king up and take this a3 pawn. Probably going to play king a2, followed by king takes a3, and there's nothing really black can do about it. Even after a4, the best move for white is just to play b4, and again walk the king up and take this pawn off. So okay, black's a pawn up, but not for long, because white's going to take that pawn off on a3. Knight c6 was played in the game, knight to d4 by Leela, knight to e7, and now just bishop to f2, king g8, and king a2. So finally Leela's going to take this pawn off, and black has to do something, so they play f5. Just to note that the knight's actually attacking the bishop, so e takes f5 cannot be played. For this reason, Leela reinforces their bishop with the c4 pawn. Takes on e4 was played, f takes e4, and knight takes d5, e takes d5. So okay, now black's got the bishop pair, but white's got an incredibly strong pawn chain here, and this really limits the bishop for black. So I think if I had to pick sides here, I'd definitely pick the white pieces. I think they've got such a strong pawn structure. Play continued on then, bishop e7. Finally, white captured on a3. King f8 was played, and now just g3. Protecting h4. Bishop to d8 was played, and knight to b5, attacking this weak d6 pawn. If black takes this off, then it just loses, because then takes, c takes, and after rook a8, king a4, rook c8 and then b6, white's just going to hoover up this a5 pawn, and they've got a great passed b pawn here, and it's going to be very difficult for black to stop this. So instead of capturing on b5, which is quite suicidal, Stockfish played f6, rook f1 was played, king f7, king to b2 to get off the a file, and now Leela played bishop to d4, hitting the f6 pawn twice. If black defends this pawn with king f7, then I think white can play rook a1, and they get a good game after g5 and b4 because the a pawn is pinned. Let's say king g6, bishop c3 and f5, then takes can be played on g5. Black can take on b5, and pawn takes, rook b6. We get into this variation, rook takes a5, and actually white comes out much better. In the game though, instead of protecting the f pawn, g5 was just played by Stockfish. I think the point is, after white takes his pawn off, takes, black can just swap off everything with pawn takes h4, pawn takes, take the knight, and then play rook b6, and all of a sudden white's advantage is sort of disintegrated. Black can just play rook takes b5 at the right moment, and this is probably going to be a drawn endgame. So after g5 though, Leela played rook h1, so they're obviously aware of this mass trade of pieces, and they didn't want to go in for this. The Stockfish took on h4, rook takes h4 was played, and now bishop to g4 to protect the h5 pawn, and the rook drops back to h1 because it's no longer needed on that weird square. King g7 by Stockfish, and now knight to a7, going to reroute the knight to c6, dominating that bishop on d8. Play continued on then, king f7, knight c6, hitting the bishop, the rook protects by Stockfish, rook e1 was played by Leela, gaining the open file, bishop d7 to attack the knight on c6, and now Leela deemed it the right moment to trade some pieces. Knight takes bishop, check, rook takes knight, and then bishop to b6, attacking the rook and the pawn on a5, and we're into an opposite bishop coloured endgame. And now when you get into these opposite coloured bishop endgames, people often think it's a draw, but there are so many subtleties in this position. For instance, look at black's pawns all on dark squares, and these could be easy pickings for the white bishop. So if black decided to protect their a pawn here, this is quite passive, and play could continue bishop c7 attacking d6. If black continues to defend, then just rook a1 attacking the a pawn again. A4 is pretty much forced, and white can just play b4 and play king c3 followed by b5, king b4, and just win the a pawn in a few more moves. So instead of being passive, Stockfish is more active, plays rook g8, attacking the g3 pawn. This allows white to take on a5 though. Stockfish does take the pawn on g3. However, after bishop c7, rook g2 check, king c3, another check, king b4. This just helps white to move their king up into an ideal position. Stockfish plays rook to d3, but there's no way for black to protect this d6 pawn, so Leela just takes it off. Threatens to play rook e7 check, so bishop g4 is played, pretty much forced, and now just rook g1. So to be honest, in the hands of an expert, this looks completely won for white. I guess if you maybe were a bit of an amateur player, you might still think this is a bit of a drawn endgame. So let's just see how Leela continues. So Stockfish plays f5, rook g3, offering the trade of rooks, and the point here is now if they traded this, rook takes, bishop takes, look at these three advanced passed pawns for white. They're pretty much unstoppable, and there's no way that black's going to be able to get rid of all of them. Especially because white's king is in such an ideal position, they can always help the pawns get up the board. So instead of trading off, Stockfish has played rook to d4. But now we see what Leela does, plays king c5, again gets the king into a great position, attacks the rook, rook e4 is played, rook d3 getting behind their d pawn, h4 is played, rook d4 again offering the trade of rooks. Again this doesn't suit black because this bishop on d6 is so strong. It'll hoover up these two pawns if they ever manage to get to these two squares. Rook e8 is played by Stockfish then, b4, a check, king b6, rook e8, and now just b5. And the point is now, white's just coming up with these pawns, and how is black going to stop this? They try bishop to e2, but this doesn't really work because now Leela can just take on h4, wins another pawn, and this is pretty much game now. King f6 is played, c5, rook d8, attacking the bishop, but then just comes king c7, and now this b pawn can just march up the board. So let's see what happens. Rook g8, b6, another check is thrown in. The king goes to b8, bishop to f3, hitting the d5 pawn. Rook d4 to protect their pawn. Just in the nick of time, rook g8 check, king a7. Stockfish just get behind the pawns, but then just b7, and now it's pretty much game over. You can see what's going to happen here. White's promoted to a queen, they take it, f4 is played, rook takes f4, and white's just got two solid passed pawns. Leela actually plays rook g4 check for no reason whatsoever. Stockfish takes it. But the point is now this is game, and Stockfish resigned this position. Now this was an interesting game because Leela made this look really easy to beat Stockfish. And yeah, pretty much had no issues throughout this whole game. Just traded off a load of pieces, made Stockfish's position incredibly weak, and just dominated the endgame. So it was very nice positional play from Leela. But anyway, hope you enjoyed my analysis. Thank you very much for watching. I believe I just hit 1500 subscribers today, so thank you very much to everyone who has subscribed. And hopefully I'll see you soon with another chess analysis video. So see you next time.